But when he died, I remembered her saying to me, this was God's plan. And I thought, God, I wish, God, sorry to use that, but I wish that I could be with you on this. Like, I wish I had that truly holistic belief that this was the plan, or totally not believe at all. But I'm in that in between, right? In that nebulous state of really believing that there is that presence, but not having that complete, unquestionable belief that our more observant relatives have. And I think I wish I had that.
That was Naomi Langer Voss on different approaches to belief in God. We were discussing Have Mercy, Loretta, which is based on Psalm 6. I'm Shep Rosenman. This is The Rest is Commentary, where we discuss what songs inspired by the Psalms inspire in my guests. Naomi and I met at Camp Raleigh in Livingston Manor, New York. Its tagline was a sports camp in a Torah environment. Naomi hung out with the cool crew, so I didn't get to know her too well. Years later, she told me I hung out with the cool crew, and that's why she didn't get to know me too well. We reconnected when I moved to LA to become an entertainment lawyer. She was about to graduate from UCLA's School of Architecture and would work for renowned architect Frank Gehry for years. Naomi and her family have become our chosen family. They now live in Manhattan. Naomi continues to have private architecture clients, but her passion is an organization she founded, Arc Scholars, which educates underprivileged youth to become architects and to build spaces that work in their communities. You can find out more by going to www.arcscholars.org. Naomi and I discuss belief in God, the connection between fear and love, living with loss, and so much more. Let's start off by listening to Have Mercy, Loretta.
Shaken with a melody, the groaning of a piano. My heart is dancing rather comically. Loretta, you're a dynamo. I don't wanna only hold your hand. Loretta, I can barely breathe. My bones are shaking, so you'll understand. Your glances bring me to my knees. The shrieking of a smoke alarm, Loretta in a blazing dance. You're the fire that I will disarm. Heed the sound of new romance. Have mercy. Have mercy. Have mercy. Oh, Loretta, oh, I love you. Have mercy.
not only provide service in your life as an architect, but you teach it.
Mm-hmm.
From where I sit, that is a direct expression of kindness and compassion. Can you talk about if
Sure.
that's true and your teaching?
Of course. So I think, to me, the biggest shift that I've had in my, recent life is really my connection to community, not necessarily the Jewish community. In fact, not the Jewish community at all, but really sort of working through this idea of outreach to the community at large. And that manifests itself in this nonprofit I started, where I'm reaching out to young adults living in, the New York City housing projects.
What's it called? And do you have a website?
Sure. The program is called ARC Scholars, and it's arcscholars.org.
ARC, A-R-C?
A-R-C, scholars, one word, .org. And it really is, the mission is to give students who might not have the words or the opportunities to engage with their physical environment, the language and the skills to be able to do that. So we teach them design ideas, and we actually take their living conditions, which are pretty substandard for living in America, leader of the free world, that these are people who are living in conditions that are pretty unacceptable, and giving them the respect and the thought process to help them figure out how to make those physical experiences better. And what I've realized is that I think it's very respectful to listen to anybody talk about how they live and how they want to live. And I think it gives them a sense of importance. And I think it's very humbling to understand that students and young adults are the same across the world. So probably the student who I think is the most insightful lives in a pretty subhuman condition with his family and has just tremendous ideas about public art and community and architecture equal to anybody I've ever seen in any school, architecture school or architecture office. Wow. And I think there's tremendous potential in young adults to be able to think outside of their box when they're given freedom to not be bogged down with the terrors in their life. And for me, that's a way that I can reach out to community by saying to this student, your idea is as good as any architecture idea I've ever heard. And I want to help you. If you want to pursue a career in architecture, let me get you into an architecture program. If you want to work for a firm, I'm running an internship. I'm hosting and sponsoring an internship this summer for my students to be able to see what it's like to work in different offices, that there's really a sense of a bigger community. And I think New York compresses people in a way that you can't turn on a blinder. You have to look around you. Actually, you don't have to. You can't help but looking around you and seeing what the bigger community is.
So that is, from my perspective, a true manifestation of God being in the community. And we'll save it for another time, but here's another thing I want you to cogitate on. Does God inspire designs, or is it all coming from your brain?
I often am in a place that's not necessarily man-made, but it could be man-made, where I think there has to be a divine presence that makes something this spectacular. Mm-hmm. I was hiking with Emmett in Torrey Pines, which is in La Jolla. And because of all the rain, the wildflowers are in unbelievable bloom. And they're making this pattern that's could only come from another presence, right? How else could something be that beautifully arranged? And yeah, we could say the wind blew the seeds, but I think there's a different presence that makes something that looks like that. And I think that's true. I think God does give people inspiration to how they are going to build the world.
We may not be able to see the angels, but we can, in your case, see design threads and put them in your buildings or your interior design. And I grab what I can from the ether to create music. And that in and of itself is a gift. And those gifts can be used to help grow the community. So let's just dive in. Tehillim inspired me to write this song. What inspiration did it create for you? Questions, commentary, curiosities?
Okay, so I think my biggest question is about you wrote a love song that feels like there's a certain urgency and sort of a fear of reciprocal love is what I read into it.
Fear of unreciprocated love?
Unreciprocated love. And you use the word love a lot. And when you read the text, it's really about just general like fear and desire to be heard and almost like a begging to be sort of kept up. So I understand that there's urgency in both of them. And I'm wondering about why you turned this into a love story about you with your partner, when I think it's maybe a different relationship between your love between you and God.
You may have answered the question, I think, by that little kind of closer at the end. It's a different relationship. It's a love song to Shari. And if you look at the photo, that's Shari as a young woman before I even met her. And as I try to do in a lot of these songs, I try to make them work on two levels. So this song is a love song to God, but it's a love song to Shari. And I like to make the joke when I'm playing these live that Shari is divine. So, it's the same thing for me. I guess I want to flip it back at you. When you read the text and you read it as a plaintiveness, a longing, I forget the word you used, do you experience that in your your human love relationships?
My relationship with God is very different than my relationship with people. Let's say my romantic relationship with Jason is very different than my relationship with God, where I feel like, and maybe this is what you're capturing, where I feel like my relationship with God is really fear, for sure, which comes out when you're reading the biblical text, right? It's really about like, please have mercy on me. That's what I get out of it. Mm-hmm. It's not as reciprocated. I want to go back to that word because I think human relationships, you're really relying on what you understand to be built into a love relationship, which is reciprocated love. So you're writing this song, pouring out your love for Shari, but in your being, you know that that's a reciprocated relationship, right? You feel to her that sort of passion, that real longing, that sense of connection, but you know that that's a reciprocated position. In my experience, my relationship with Jason or other people that I love, but let's keep it as a romantic relationship. I really feel that that's a reciprocated connection.
Right.
And I think the relationship with God is much more questionable to me, which is, right, you don't know how it's coming back to you.
Right.
I mean,
Does God talk to us in a language we understand?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think devoutly believe that there is a God. I very much believe in being a Jew. I think that I don't get on an airplane without saying Shema. I don't put my son to sleep without saying Shema. I feel like that's very much a part of me. And I don't feel necessarily the reciprocation. Maybe it's just life traumas of just feeling tremendous loss and pain and agony personally. Yeah. Just with health and sickness and death in our family is sort of disproportionate in my life has been. So I wonder about that, which is the difference between what you're getting back, and maybe we don't know what we're going to get back from God until the next life.
I want you to go back to one of those moments of tremendous loss. And think about whether you had an experience when you were saying, is there a God? Or if you firmly believe that there is a God, where you were in that moment of saying, why? Right? Or flip it. Not that you and Jason ever fight, but if you did, there's a blocking, there's a baffle or a something between you and Jason in that moment where you might not experience the love, where you might be trembling and looking, what's the language of it? Have mercy on me, for I languish, right? That's the English here. The Hebrew is better, but I'm not going to focus on that. My bones are shaking with terror. Like, not that you would ever do anything wrong because we know you are perfect, but where you feel like, I could have handled this differently. Was there a moment of, if not terror, but fear that you got it wrong?
I tend to be reactive. So I think there's definitely a moment where I feel like I've gotten things wrong in my approach with Jason. If that's
what do you mean by reactive?
We just have a generally different way of communicating. So I'm much more, this is how I feel at the moment. I share how I feel at that moment. I don't really hold back so much. And
one of your gifts.
And he will take, and then I'm done. Like I say what I'm frustrated about or what I'm upset about. It's true with my kids too. And then I'm sort of over it. Like I got it. I flushed it through. Usually it's thought out. It's not so immediate, but it tends to be more immediate. Jason can sit with something for a while before that comes out. So I think it's a different way of processing it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he had the forum to communicate things that were difficult for him when he was growing up, or anybody who was necessarily interested in fleshing out those topics. So I think for him, he sort of just bottled it up. It's a much newer experience for him to be able to say, wow, this was upsetting for me, or this is something I'm struggling with. Let's talk about it. And my growing up, we just talked about things that were upsetting and bothering us the whole time.
The daughter of two therapists, one biological parent and one step parent. You dealt with it in a healthy way.
Yeah. So I think we were just much more out there with what we're thinking about.
You said that even if it's immediate, it's still thought out. So there's a moment between the doing the wrong thing and the time that it comes out of your lips where you want to raise the question, where there's processing happening. Is there fear, concern? Again, maybe terror, like, if you're not married to Sherry, there's terror on my end when I screw something up. Or you know what, when things are bad, there's a fear that they're not going to get better. Or at least there has been. I mean, thank God things are great with us and have been for a very, very long time. But we had moments where it wasn't good and there was fear on both of our parts that it wasn't going to get better. So, and again, I don't want to hit this too hard, but I think it responds to the question that you asked. How did I make the move from the terror in the psalm to the love in the song? And by the way, I think it shows up in the psalm too, and we'll come back to that.
I don't think I've ever been in that experience where I thought it wouldn't resolve with Jason. I certainly felt that with Bruce, and I think it was the right situation that relationship had aspects of it that really couldn't be resolved in a way that was comfortable to me. I don't feel that with Jason, even when we'll have a bad 2 weeks or a month or whatever that is, because of typically it's like an external source that we haven't really been able to talk through or resolve, or just things that are tough in life that we haven't managed to grapple together in a way. I've never had that feeling that this was something that we wouldn't be able to resolve.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. That's great.
I don't ever think I feel in any moments of questioning that I don't believe in God. Mm-hmm. So even at the low points, I don't think I felt to myself, is this really enough to push me to the point where I'm not going to believe in God anymore? And I've never had that.
Just reflecting back on conversations we've had over the years, I think the hardest moment you hit was the back-to-back hit of the loss of your brother and the loss of your father, where even then you said, it's not that you don't believe in God, but you don't understand why this happened.
Right.
And the belief in God piece is something we share. And I've talked about this with other people in other podcasts. It's not whether I believe in God. That's sacrosanct. There's no question there. The question is, what does God do and what exactly does God want of us? And I think that we spend our lives trying to figure that out. And big moments like a wedding, like a divorce, like the loss of a loved one. We recently lost a friend, as you know, and that's a big moment where you kind of re-engage and ask those questions. Why is God punishing this family? My theology is such that I don't believe God is punishing the family, but why did God let it happen? And for me, it's complicated. I don't know. I want to believe that God intercedes on a personal level, but I'm not sure that God does. I guess I would love to hear your take on that, if you're comfortable sharing that.
So that's interesting, because if you don't believe that God intercedes on a personal level, what's your feeling about tefillah?
Tefillah meaning prayer.
Yeah, prayer. Like, if you don't believe that God is interceding, then what happens when you're praying?
First and foremost, I think tefillah is for me, or it's for the individuals. Tefillah, prayer, it's just a form of meditation. At the end of yoga, Marquetta, who runs the amazing Yoga by the Sea in Oxnard, always says, okay, ask for, list 3 things you're grateful for and ask for 3 things of the universe. And when you look at the structure of the Amidah, the silent meditation prayer, the 18 blessings that is kind of the fulcrum of Jewish prayer, morning, afternoon, and evening, the structure is, wow, God, you're great. That is immediately followed by, I'm so sorry, slach lanu, right? I mean, there's another blessing in there, but that's structurally. And then from there you go to, God, please give us the following. And it's a series of requests for health, for wealth, for abundance, ultimately for peace. We'll come back to that. Then it's thank you, modim. And then it's, okay, God, please make us whole. You have the gratitude, modim, and you have the requests. First and foremost, prayers for me. What do I want? And I don't know if God intercedes in my life. But if God does, here's the list of presents I want, Santa, as it were. The other possibility that I wrestle with, and I think this is where I land, and this is kind of voodoo-y, but I feel like what we do in the world has consequences that we human beings can't see, except maybe there are some spiritual people who can see that, who can see behind the veil. For example, our tradition says, give a lot of charity. And charity, tzedakah, has the same root as the word righteousness and the same root as the word justice. When you give charity, you are doing something righteous and right for the world and just for the world. Though because you can't explain theodicy and why bad shit happens to particular people or families, I don't believe that this is a full concept, but as a general rule, I feel like if you do something good, it's going to create positive energy, if you will. If you do something bad, it's going to create negative energy. Traditional Jewish theology is that, okay, the accounts are going to be balanced, whether it's in the next life or in the days of the Messiah. On some level, that's a soft answer, but on another level, it's the only answer that you can live with because it doesn't otherwise make sense.
I relate much more to the brachot at the beginning, like the first prayers that you say of the day, because I think they're about, feeding the poor and clothing providing clothing, providing food, sort of a sense that there's a community idea about God. I think there are a few things. I think that sits well with me, the idea that you are part of a community and that your hope is that your community sort of has tentacles and reaches out to the general world. And it's really about, a tikkun olam position. That sits more comfortably, I think, to me than necessarily the personal rewards and punishments. I think that's the way I've been able to wrap my head around like personal trauma, is by saying, let's think, for me, I think about this as a community idea, right? That there is something around that is helping us think about what our community responsibilities are, both within like a Jewish community and within sort of the community of the world.
Prayer wasn't supposed to be linear. You start with Birchas HaShachar, the morning blessings, and you end with Aleinu in the Ashkenazic tradition. In the Sephardi tradition, or Nusach Sfard, the Hasidic tradition, or the Shir Shel Yom, the Song of the Day in the Ashkenazi tradition. It wasn't supposed to be that you start there and end there. There was a structure, a matbea tefillah, but I don't know that we were intended, and this is the conclusion I came to after doing God knows how much reading about prayer. I don't know that we were intended to say all of it. My friend, Yafa Epstein, a rabbi in New York, asked me how my spiritual life was going. We were at a retreat together, and I said to her, not so well. I just can't get it up for davening. I can't pray right now. I don't remember what was going on, but I was feeling angry and frustrated with God and just generally cranky. And she said, what, you can't spend 45 minutes? I said, I can spend 45 minutes, but I don't have the interest in it. And because it's 45 minutes, that prevents me from going, because I hate going late to shul. So she said, okay, can you take 1 minute? I'm like, yeah. She said, okay, biblically, your chiyuv, your obligation as a prayer is to do 3 things. Shevach, bakasha, hoda'ah. Praise, request, and thanks. Those are the ingredients of prayer. So if you say, God, you rock, please keep me healthy, thanks so much for keeping me alive, you are done with your prayer obligations for the day, biblically. And she changed my life because it depressurized prayer for me, because I felt like, in order to really pray, I had to go to shul with my tefillin and devote essentially an hour with the commute time, even though it was a 10-minute drive away. And now that I know that there's this minimum that I can do in under a minute, walking the dog on the beach, as I get out of bed and check that particular box, now I feel inclined to pray. Ultimately, what I'm getting at is I think the rabbis created a variety of technologies, approaches, philosophies to this.
If you think about these things this morning, you're good for the day, right? You're thinking about your community. You're thinking about people that are sick. You're thinking about whatever you're thinking about that you're a well person. I feel like that's a great way to start the day.
Like you, I was brought up with rote recitation. I first started getting into it when I studied at BMT. Like I spent my first few months at BMT basically cutting classes and playing music in Ben Yehuda Square and in Dizengoff in Tel Aviv. But at some point I got into it. And when I got into it, there was a trifecta going on. I had Rav Berzon teaching me Gemara, and he was really smart. That's the Talmud. He exposed me and my class to, we were like the B class, maybe even the C class. We were not in the like sophisticated, complex, the higher advanced classes, the shiurim. So, he got the guys who were rebellious and harder to manage. So he got our number. And at some point in the year, he started teaching us what was and wasn't permissible in terms of sex. And now all of a sudden I'm interested in Gemara, right? This 16, 17-year-old, 18-year-old boys. We were still boys then, very much emotionally, even if we were on our way to being men. And I had Rav Kahana, not Meir, but his brother Nachman, teaching me a more spiritual path and specifically connecting that spiritual path to music, which he knew was my passion. And at another class, and sadly I don't remember the name of this teacher, I can picture him, but he was teaching me tefillah. And it was biur tefillah. It was the explanation of tefillah. His focus was on the kavana, the intention piece. So the Talmud talks about having both kavana and keva. So regular fixed structures and times. You always go to minyan at 8. You sit in the same seat. You say it the same way, but you also have to have the right intentions and have it the whole time. As someone diagnosed with ADD, not as a teenager, but in college, that's impossible for me. But on the other hand, because I have ADD, I can hyperfocus, and sometimes for very long periods of time. What I learned through that experience was not only the meaning of the text, but the importance of shifting between the focus on kavanah, intentions, and keva, routine. And that sticks with me today throughout all aspects of my life. But I learned that in that class. So there's this tension, if you do the same thing every day, it will make you a better prayer. On the other hand, it gets boring and you lose interest. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but at least you're playing the game. At least you're practicing, as it were. And there's a lot of merits to that. And I really, truly felt that when I was going to shul every day. The other thing that I heard, and this is more Hasidic, I think I heard this from Reb Mimi Feigelson, just because you don't have kavanah on a particular day doesn't mean that your prayer was wasted. Prayers float in the air, as it were, waiting for that one tefillah that has kavanah to lift it. So when one goes up, they all go up. And that's a beautiful image. I mean, whether it's true or not, God knows. God knows. It's a useful way of thinking about it for someone like me who gets frustrated with the process sometimes. When I was growing up, my brother was not too religious, was too irreligious, and my sister was too religious. My father wanted me to be just like him. You know, modern Orthodox, someone who works in the world, but is halachically observant, isn't too into studying, and is okay eating at Howard Johnson's, right? Which doesn't have rabbinic certification. But you can only have tuna there, and if you want the eggs, they have to make it in silver foil. He had a very specific set of rules, and he didn't want you to be too much more religious or too much less religious. That's what he wanted, and he made that known. Like you, he was a powerful force. Both of my parents were powerful forces in my life. And each of us kind of did our own thing, which is the nature of growing up. I've taken a somewhat different approach with my kids. I've made it very clear I would like them to have religious practice in their lives. But at the end of the day, I also recognize that this is their life. I can't control it. All I can do is set certain boundaries. I expect you to be here for the holidays and to engage with us, even if I'm not expecting them to come to shul, but I will invite them, right? And that's the kind of dichotomy I wanted to get at. Is there not an opportunity for you to say to Kayla and Serena, I want to invite you into my views on tefillah in case you ingest it and it has an impact on you later, whether you agree with me, disagree with me, or process it for a long time and gather more data.
I wish that I was not had as much doubt. When my brother died, I remember his wife.
Can we say his name to honor him?
Akiva Shammai died. I remember talking to his wife, who had really witnessed an 8-year coma, a year and a half of marriage where they produced a spectacular child, beautiful daughter, pure joy, light. She's just an incredible person. And she was married to somebody who, after a year and a half, was in a coma for the last 8 years of his life and has now been dead. So she's 20 years without a husband. But when he died, I remembered her saying to me, this was God's plan. And I thought, God, I wish God, sorry to use that, but I wish that I could be with you on this. Like, I wish I had that truly holistic belief that this was the plan, or totally not believe at all. But I'm in that in between, right? In that nebulous state of really believing that there is that presence, but not having that complete, unquestionable belief that our more observant relatives have. And I wish I had that.
We haven't spent much time talking about the lyrics, other than to talk about the fact that it starts off as a love song and the psalm doesn't appear to be a love song. So here's what I see. There's a transition in verse 7 that kind of really got me into this. Verse 7, which says, I'm weary with groaning. Every night I drench my bed. I melt my couch in tears. So the psalmist, traditionally, if it doesn't say Tfilah Moshe or, Mizmor Shir Livnei Korach, a prayer from Moses or a song for the sons of Korach, we assume it was written by David. And David was known to be God's poet. As you see from this one, it's not just, this one is a complainer. It's about complaining to God, specifically complaining in the context of fear, It's fear with instrumental music. So, there are all these hints to me, including the instrumental music, like da, 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 there's some instrumental music playing in the background. God knows what it was. And it immediately dives from the instrumental music to don't punish me. For me, when I think about being punished, I don't know that God punishes me. God might punish me, but I don't know that. Thank God we have a pretty good life. I also don't think that there's a lot to punish me for, except unless orthodoxy is right. And, that's a whole other conversation. So when I think about punishment, I think about doing things wrong. That brings me back to my youth as a kid, when I did things wrong and got in trouble for not paying attention in class, for, throwing lemons into the ventilation shaft at the Granite Hotel, for being with Louis Spitzer when he was spitting on the drummer for the Messengers, just all these kid things I did to get in trouble, whatever it was, stealing onion rings. None of them is so terrible. I haven't murdered anyone, haven't raped anyone. I have never beat anyone up where there was anything more than the injury of the punch when we were in a fight, right? Nothing long lasting. So I tried to put myself in a moment, and now I'm back in verse 3. Have mercy on me, O Lord, for I languish. Heal me, O Lord, for my bones shake with terror. When have I been terrified? It goes back to what I was saying before. I've been terrified when I've disappointed people, my parents, my wife. I had written a song about my parents. I'm sure or several songs about them. But it occurred to me that, there's an opportunity to write about my wife. And I was like, I don't want to write a song about a moment in which I screwed up with Shari. I've written other songs where I did this dual thing, forgive me, God, forgive me, Shari, that duality. So I was like, what's going on here? I looked for the source behind the terror. And for me, I came to the conclusion in my mind mapping, my, stream of consciousness writing, that this was David, if David was the author, was terrified because he had disappointed his lover. And that's the genesis. Those are the two things I highlighted. You're in terror, you're in tears because you feel you've disappointed them. But what's behind it is love. If you don't love someone, you're not, okay, so you disappointed them. So what? And now it could be that it's just love, because it's respect. But for me, I focused on the love piece. The words I'm in verse 5 now, rescue me, come on and rescue me, right? That's language that makes its way into many love songs. Save me makes its way into many love songs. So there's all these little elements. And of course, I edited out for there is no praise of you among the dead in Sheol, right? Like that's not love song worthy from my perspective.
With the risk of sounding argumentative,
please.
I do not believe that fear comes from love only. I think fear can also just come from fear for your life or for the health of your family or for your personal health, your livelihood. So I don't think that fear comes necessarily from, yes, I think you're worried about disappointing is one way. I read this more of fear for your life as opposed to fear for disappointment, but that doesn't mean that's not what guided you.
Something happened. I probably have in my notes what the moment, not that I remember it at this minute, but something happened and David did not want to be punished. Bathsheba, maybe, for the sin of Bathsheba, or when he didn't pay attention and left the king alive, forget from which of the nations, or there are a bunch of places where David made a mistake. And that's between verse 1 and 2, but it happens somewhere between the period after the word David and the parenthesis before the number 2. David is saying, don't punish me. They're already in relationship. And if you're before a judge, well, let's get a very real example. A cop's giving you a ticket. You can say, have mercy on me, but you're never going to go to this length of extremity. It's this length of drama and power. There's something that happened. There's something that expresses the relationship between them.
To me, this is like the kind of agony you would feel if you were worried that you were not going to survive, right? I am weary with groaning every night. I drench my bed. To me, this is a fear for your life.
Yeah. Well, your argument is supported by verse 6, for there's no praise of you among the dead, right? So if he's in fear for his life, once he dies, he's not going to be able to praise God. I think that that's a strong read of this, but it's not the read that I had. I pulled out language from the psalm itself, right? Which included, do not chastise me in fury. Have mercy. I languish. Heal me. My bones shake with terror. Rescue me. So I'm already, my memory is pretty good finding that kind of language. Now, I could have gone in a different direction. I then wrote nouns: bed, piano, guitar, glasses, bottle, smoke alarm, headphones, shredder, quilt, window. I don't remember how I got to those. I then wrote verbs. I'm groaning, I'm screaming, I'm swimming, I'm melting, I'm grieving, I'm cloudy, I'm watching, I'm weary. This is one of the processes I go through. I'm shaking, just heal me for the sake of your cutting love. That obviously didn't make it into these lyrics. And then I have a bunch of other stuff, but I came up with language structure. This is like my first draft. I don't want to hold your hand. I want to hold you very close. I'm shaking to my bones. You're the one I love the most. That became, my bones are shaking with a melody. The groaning of a piano, my heart is dancing rather comically. Loretta, you're a dynamo. So somewhere in there, I must have made the choice that I didn't want to write about fear and terror, but I wanted to focus on something positive. Could have been my mood in that moment. Anyway, that was a great question. Thank you for challenging me on that. I thank you so much for being part of that.
This was amazing. Thank you.
I love you so much. I'm so glad we got to do this.
Me too. This was great.
Thanks so much for listening. Special thanks to Naomi for joining me, to Emil Stern for his help producing the episode, to Eros for his help producing the song and the episode, to Jessica Hanna Sweedler for her help on social media, to Liat Silvera for designing the podcast logo, to my wife Sherry. We're continuing to wish her a complete recovery and a speedy one from her knee replacement surgery. Again, thanks to everyone who's been helping out. To this day, she doesn't really understand why I called this song Loretta when it's about her. Frankly, neither do I, but perhaps I had Lyle Lovett's song in mind, even though my love for Sherry is not really quite as twisted as the singer's love is for the Loretta character in his song. You can find Have Mercy Loretta and all the other songs in this song cycle on most platforms that stream or download music, including Spotify and Apple and YouTube. Now for the shameless self-promotion bit. Again, it really helps if you share the episodes and songs, and if you like, comment, and subscribe to the podcast, and to me as an artist on your favorite platforms. In the next episode of The Rest is Commentary, I will be talking with my friend and client, director Stephen Hopkins. We're going to talk about war, politics, and so much more. Please join us.